is it was triggered by moments when some strategies failed, not because it was flawed or not because it was not thought through, but because the cultural readiness wasn't there. People weren't aligned, they weren't empowered, and the engagement towards the final result had a gap. Where
Mhm.
strategies usually are made with, we need to become XYZ $1 billion organization, or we want to have XYZ percentage in our growth area, or the EBITDA should go XYZ hub, without aligning with the people, because human resource is the biggest asset of any organization. They are there is when the production or the produce happens at the bottom level, right? And that's where I found the trigger, that the change, that why are we not involving people in our decision making. Final decision is definitely us, for our leaders to say that this is what we want to do. Then why can't we take suggestions? Why can't we hear out the opinions? Why can't we truly listen to our teams, right? Decision making authority, yes, with us, but then we can involve people there.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Coacharya's webinar today. As you're joining us, do let us know where in the world you're joining us from. Let us know in the chat box and make sure that you've selected everyone when you're writing in the chat box. And please do feel free to use the chat box during the course of this webinar. We will take up the questions that you post in the chat box towards the end of the webinar. So please do share your thoughts and your questions with us. In our webinar today, we are asking a question, and it's about coaching beyond HR walls. The question is, can leaders be culture catalysts? Well, we say yes, and you're about to know more about what we're trying to say in this webinar. But before I pass it on to Smita to carry the webinar forward, I would just like to mention that we do have a bunch of special programs coming up in September. We also have an NLP program coming up very soon. All of these details would be in the chat box shortly, so please feel free to check those links out. And with that, Smita, over to you.
Right. Thank you, Yamini. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Really appreciate your time and you joining us here for this webinar. So, as Yamini mentioned, we are talking about this topic on coaching beyond HR walls. Um, Pratibha and Nanda, maybe you're already feeling light as you're hearing it because a little bit of pressure of this passes to Gurvinder here. Yeah. So we're talking about can leaders be culture catalyst? And today in this session, I'm thrilled to have all of you here as we explore the fundamental shift happening in organizations worldwide, the democratization of culture ownership through coaching behavior. So the session today is not going to be about any theory, it's all about action. And you will hear from these three exceptional leaders who you can see on the screen, who are not just talking about coaching, but truly living it. So with that, whether you're from HR or from business, a coach joining in, this conversation will really offer some practical ways to activate a coaching culture across the org chart and not just inside HR. So with that said, let me just quickly introduce the three leaders here that you see on screen. Gurvinder is an electrical engineer and brings 32 years of global experience based in Dubai. He's hub manager at ABB. He's worked with various multinational before, also a sports enthusiast, a qualified state level cricket umpire. I was really inspired reading this, Gurvinder.
Thank
So yeah, welcome to this webinar, Gurvinder. Moving on, Pratibha, she's a HRBP at ABB and supporting over 600 employees across 8 countries. She holds a master's in HR and is currently pursuing her ACC coaching certification with Coacharya. Outside of work, she's a proud mom, a music lover. Introducing Nanda, who is a global HR leadership learning coach with over 18 years of HR experience and worked over various Fortune 500 companies. He is also holding a PCC and ACT, about to get ACTC and other certifications. He's a passionate lifelong learner with degrees in engineering, music, literature, etc. Welcome, Pratibha and Nanda.
Thank you, Smita.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, so let's get started. Ananda, the first question for you. We often hear culture eats strategy for breakfast. Yeah. So, how has your perspective evolved on who actually owns culture within your organization? If you can throw some light.
Absolutely, Smita. Thanks for asking a great question and apt for today's topic, Smita. So, as many of you may have already heard about the quote, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast," which is widely attributed to Peter Drucker, if you've heard of him, who's a renowned management consultant. And this is the same with our organization as well, where this resonates deeply with us because it underscores the reality that even the most brilliant strategies can falter, and it can falter in the absence of a supportive and aligned culture. And over time, my perspective of who owns culture has evolved significantly. Initially, like many of you, I believed culture was primarily the domain of HR, and we do everything as HR team, be business partners or hiring or compensation or learning and development. Everything is from HR, and we own everything. And something which we have shaped through our policy preparations, the MIs, the training, the engagement initiatives. But now that view has shifted for me, where today I see that culture as something which is co-owned by the leadership team, by the teams that we work with, by each and every individual in the organization. And the result shift, the real shift for me, which happened when we started seeing the culture was not the top-down approach or the not top-down mandate that we have, but as a lived experience which is shaped by everyday behaviors, everyday decisions, and everyday conversations. So I'll quickly quote an example. What had happened with me, which changed the complete perspective for me, was some of the things. I'm a chemical engineer. Like whatever introduction, the amazing introduction Smita did, I don't belong from a education background on the HR perspective, right? I'm a chemical engineer, and wherever I have been working, I've started my career as HR team itself in the recruitment, and everywhere I went, "You're a chemical engineer. What are you doing here? Why do you want to join HR?" And nobody understood that why not an engineer be in the HR, which will be that much more beneficial for the business. The person knows the engineering part of it, the manufacturing or the business part of it, and then they can bring in so much of ideas, so much of resolution, so much of support to the business. And that happened for almost like 10 years in my career, wherever I've moved in those Fortune 500, which Smita mentioned. But when I came to this organization, it's amazing, and they did not look at why engineering is moving to a HR area, but it was more from a, oh, you have this technique, you have this knack, you have this skill, and you are a novice where you want to learn more. That's what they saw, and that's when the culture shift happened to me. It was a very drastic change for me. And even within the organization, typically manufacturing setups, the business models are a little different, was what my perception was, because I've worked in retail and investment banking, BPOs, KPOs, and the culture there is like, hey, the bro kind of a culture to typical manufacturing setup where you drop a pin that can be heard. But that was something which I have seen in this organization traditionally back when I joined. To the shift, what I've seen now is that a whole lot of change, the way we speak, the way we talk about the ideas, the way we create a safe environment for everybody, the inclusion, the belonging that we create. So that has made a wonderful shift for me from what was it earlier to what is it now. Not that HR owns the culture, but it's a shared responsibility of every individual in the organization.
Amazing. I love the word co-owned that you used, Nanda. It's such a beautiful word. And also when you said about, it doesn't really live in policy, but it's all about for you to really put it into practice. So any specific, anything specifically that you remember that actually triggered that shift? I know you shared some, points around the shift,
Yeah.
but anything specifically that you would like to share?
Definitely, yes. The second thing that I would want to continue or to mention over here is it was triggered by moments when some strategies failed, not because it was flawed or not because it was not thought through, but because the cultural readiness wasn't there. People weren't aligned, they weren't empowered, and the engagement towards the final result had a gap. Where
Mhm.
strategies usually are made with we need to become xyz billion dollars organization, or we want to have xyz percentage in our growth area, or the ebitda should go xyz hub, without aligning with the people, because human resource is the biggest asset of any organization. They are there is when the production or the produce happens at the bottom level, right? And that's where I found the trigger, that the change, that why are we not involving people in our decision making. Final decision is definitely us, for our leaders to say that this is what we want to do. Then why can't we take suggestions? Why can't we hear out the opinions? Why can't we truly listen to our teams, right? Decision making authority, yes, with us, but then we can involve people there. That was one of the major trigger moment for me. That leaders set the tone, definitely yes, but culture is reinforced or eroded by what is tolerated, what is celebrated, and what is repeated at every single level in the organization. So for me now, I believe culture is everyone's responsibility, and coaching plays definitely a pivotal role in making that ownership real. Coaching helps leaders become more self-aware, teams more cohesive, and individuals become more and more accountable because they become the SME of the situation that they are in. And that's how we moved beyond HR walls by embedding coaching into the fine fabric of how we work and how we lead every single day.
Yeah, wonderful. So, as easy to say, that difficult to put it in practice when we are in that, pressured environment. So, with that, I would like to, invite Gurvinder as a manager. If you can share, Gurvinder, as again, an example where you successfully could embed coaching conversation into your daily practice.
First of all, thank you, Smita, for inviting me. And Nanda, I'm also an engineer, but unfortunately know nothing about HR, so I had to remain in engineering all these years. And so before I could answer your question, Smita, I need to roll back a few years. Actually, about 17 odd years ago, when I first became a first-time manager. And you can imagine at that time, at that age, you feel as you've become the president of the most powerful country. So that's the power that you experience inside, and it wasn't any different for me. And then my approach, of course, was basically very result-oriented, and the easiest way was to give instructions, solutions, even monitor, follow up, even chase at times, all to get the result. With the understanding that I began with the end in mind, right? And then the more I got the success, the more I repeated that, and of course I felt successful. And you can say that's the advantage of being inexperienced. That's the advantage of being young. But then fast forward another 5 years later, when I had now to manage a bigger team, which is spread across geographies even, And when you spread across geographies, you also face different cultures. And now when the same approach, which was so successful in my view, actually became an impediment. And I think it is when you have the potential to fail, or you're closer to failure, is the time when you really look back. And it wasn't any different for me at that time. So when I had looked back and was reflecting about and thought, was it really enough? Or was it the best approach that I had? Of course, the answer was no. And how was this approach kind of serving me or my team? If I look at from my perspective, why did it give me results? And that is why I got the high that I got, but it was not kind of serving the mid and the long-term purpose. And it never gave me the time for say the mid and the long-term strategies, or even the words like team development, empowerment, decision making, which honestly were Greek and Latin for me at that time. And then when it came to the team, this approach was actually hampering their development and growth, which I never realized. And at the same time was not serving me to be their leader. And then coming to the solution part and say how do we now imbibe the coaching culture, that made me really a necessity at that point in time. And I was really fortunate, I would say, that at the same time I was assigned a coach, and that who made me actually realize the mistakes I was making all this while. The coaching stint actually opened my mind and my eyes towards still very new words for me: empowering people and influencing them, rather than giving directions, which was actually quite natural for me even at that point in time. But when I started to do that, to my pleasant surprise, I also learned new and even efficient ways of doing the same job, as now I was able to benefit, say, from the collective intelligence of the team. And I started to realize that, you are not the most intelligent person around. There are other people who are even more intelligent in their subject, and you can take help from them. I'm actually reminded here of a famous Chinese proverb, right? Which is, give a person a fish and you feed the person for a day. And then I think we know the rest, right? Teach a person to fish, and then of course they learn it for a lifetime. I realized I was now actually asking leading questions to encourage the team to think of options, which meant that they were now coming with solutions instead of problem statements. And it was in this way I thought I created a feeling of, I was beginning to now understand what was called as empowerment rather than micromanaging or even monitoring. And if I have to draw an analogy, then it is like budgets, right? And we business people understand budgets very well, which means that as long as you are within your budget, you're allowed to take decisions and implement measures that you really need to do. And when I see it in terms of coaching, I think it is exactly the same, that as long as you have a solution, you implement it, provided, of course, that you're within those established guardrails. And fast forward it to today. Now I'm actually working in a virtual team with 8 different countries, 8 different business models, and of course, different cultures. And still I can see that I have the time to do my own value-added activities rather than being continuously in the monitoring mode, which I was for the better part of my career. But in my journey between, say, giving directions and now beginning to learn coaching was also a conflict. And the conflict was more about, when to give, say, a solution and when to use the coaching approach. Until I heard of a very interesting story, and I'm very happy to share that today. If someone comes and asks me, hey, Gurvinder, there's a fire in the building. What should we do? And if I was, in my coaching mode, which I had already got into, I had learned to say, oh, is it? Let me ask you a question. What are the options? And what do we do now? And I'm sure you can imagine what happened then. By the time the building was already burnt, right? So I think it's important then to understand the subtle difference when you need to adapt the coaching approach and when it becomes necessary to give the direction. I would say both are necessary. It depends on what situation you are in. Finally, though, I must admit that the journey is far from over for me, at least. And there are still many, many barriers that need to be collapsed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the vulnerable sharing, Gurvinder. And with this example, you really make me to reflect on saying a lot many times, when we are either coach training or, with leaders and coaches, they would often say, when to coach or when to mentor, right? Like not knowing exactly where to wear which hat. And your example beautifully describes the distinction, to so to say. So a follow-up question on that is, when we're learning something, a new skill, like say for coaching, and we know that by being coach-like, we are always empowering the other person, giving them the space and the autonomy to do that creative, thought-provoking, before we actually give them a solution. So it's very nice when initially we would have started and, we are all enthusiastic to try a new skill. So for someone like you who has not like formally gone through a training process, but really maybe learning and seeing the benefits of it and then embedding into your leadership, what made it stick beyond the initial enthusiasm for you?
Well, I think when we do something, and yeah, as they say, success is what teaches you a lot of things, right? And failure is one thing which actually teaches you to change your approach. And when I changed my approach and I started to realize the results, and as I said in the beginning, whether it was empowerment, whether it was, a development, I mean, these were definitely words for me, but I never understood the meaning. But once you start to understand those meanings and then you apply them, and when I actually saw the results, is really when I thought, yeah, okay, this is something which works for me. But then, of course, then later the conflict comes, of course, yeah. But
Yeah.
that's the learning journey.
Absolutely. It's only when, rubber meets the road is where you get the actual
Yeah.
flavor of how things are working. So it's one thing to, teach someone the coaching skills. It's totally another thing to make it like your language, whether it is in the, in your daily meetings, in your one-on-one conversation, the performance check-ins, etc. So wonderful. Thank you so much. At this point, just sharing a research-based fact which says that teams led by coaching oriented managers report 39% stronger engagement and retention.
Very true.
Right? Thank you. Thank you, Gurvinder. Moving on, Nanda, to you again, another question here as an HR. When you think about accountability of coaching culture, how do you measure whether a leader is, truly fostering it within their ecosystem versus, just like a check on a box? So it's like you are kind of having so many people join in to get the training done, and at ACC 100 hours, PCC 500 hours, and we know there is a mandate by another body which we need to fulfill. How do you really measure whether a leader is like truly kind of helping the other person, so serving the other versus serving their own needs?
Absolutely, Smita. Thanks for that. Great question, and of course, a nuanced question. Because to distinguish between true leadership accountability for a coaching culture versus a mere compliance, as you mentioned, a check in the box, we can look at both qualitative behaviors and quantitative indicators, right? Where when we think about accountability for fostering a coaching culture, we focus on the in-depth leadership behaviors rather than a surface level compliance, and this is truly what we do in our organization. And as you rightly mentioned about the 39% more of engagement and teams coming together when they have a true coaching leaders and they're proactive, they also initiate meaningful conversations without waiting for a prompt, and you can see it in the way they ask questions, the open mind that they have, the growth oriented questions that they come up with, and maintain two-way feedback loop, the giving and the receiving part of it, and also embed coaching moments in everyday rituals like the self reflections, retrospections, one-on-one conversation, the scrum calls, the stand-up calls. All of that's something which we have seen as a shift since the time we have started the coaching in culture within our organization. And to assess this, what we do, like you said, 100 hours, 500 hours mandate, which comes from different bodies for ACC, PCC, MCC kind of. even within the organization, initially when we started this, was with having a guardrail for it. That there is a spreadsheet that's created for you. Now that you're a coach, you'll have to track XYZ over here. You will need to make sure that it is updated every single time. Take feedback, come to us as your coaches, as your people development partners. Share what are your problems. We will ask questions to you, etc., etc. We really made that mandate in the beginning, because that's how the habits are formed as well, right? It takes 7 times, as the research says from Harvard, 7 times for a person to understand what is happening. When I'm speaking, I need to repeat it 7 times for the other person to understand and incept it. At the same time, it takes 21 days to create habits as well, that over and over and over and over and over again, when you start doing it, is when you will get into that habitual coaching culture. And that's exactly what we did for the first 3 months. We took that guardrail as a people development team. Once this was the coaching was the project was initiated, and we said that these are the spreadsheets, these are some of the things that you will need to do as mandate. We kept a check-in every regular intervals, so that they know that there is a guardrail, there is a governance given behind it. And after 3 months, we gave them the autonomy that yes, now you have done it. We did not tell them that, okay, 3 months done, now you do whatever you want. Definitely no. But it so became that when we stopped following up, we saw that the spreadsheet is getting updated automatically. Team leaders coming and asking us that, hey, what's happening over here? How should we take this conversation forward? Career conversations, or be it a feedback giving. There is a customer escalation that has happened. Everything started falling into picture. And moreover, coaching is not treated as a task to be completed then and now, but it is a lever for our development, right? And leaders who embrace this mindset use coaching to build future leaders. They are having that succession um, um, pipeline for themselves as well, right? And celebrating learning moments to overcome, not just over the outcomes that is coming from the coaching, but also fostering that culture. We have peer coaching that is happening, the cross-functional coaching that's happening, and this impact is visible in the long-term behaviors as well. And when we do the engagement survey as well, once a year, the needles have moved drastically. It can be on the engagement score, it can be on people development, the growth stories of individuals, the psychological safety that's been created, the innovative and creative culture that is being built. And finally, accountability is reinforced by integrating coaching effectiveness into their daily conversations. Now, it has so become that people don't even call as a coaching conversation. It is so much inculcated that they keep asking questions, 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 questions until they come to a end resolution, right? And then when we say that, and Pratibha can vouch for it, when we say that, oh, you just asked an amazing coaching question, and the teams will be like, oh, did I do that? Oh, which means I'm already doing it. I did not know the word for that was coaching.
Yeah.
That's how much of compliance versus competence, compliance versus commitment has come within the organization. So this holistic approach ensures that coaching culture is sustained and embedded, not just performed as a compliance and a check in the box. So that's that.
Truly, truly amazing with the amount of hard work. All of what you shared right now would have taken for you, Nanda, and of course for the team there. So great. All right. Now, Pratibha made you wait for a long time.
No
We
problem.
want to hear from you. So the traditional model positions HR as the culture custodian. We've been talking about this and the shift. So what are your thoughts on just this?
Yeah. So I would echo Nanda's views that he expressed earlier, right, on who owns culture. While HR definitely facilitates or enables culture through various programs, policies, uh, and role modeling, of course, but I think culture is ultimately shaped by everyday behaviors, especially the leaders and the people who are there at various levels in the organization, across the organization. So when we speak about organization culture, I think it is co-created. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So co-created, co-owned, beautiful words out there. And how do you help leaders understand that culture should function more like a operating system that everyone runs rather than than a program that just someone manages?
Yeah. Uh, Before I get into answering that question, I think, Smita, let me narrate to you a couple of my first-hand experiences on how we have seen culture shift. Um, so if I just go back into my career 15 years ago, and we were driving diversity and inclusion agenda. So basically, for example, we were trying to have more women in the workforce. During the hiring, when profiles were being screened and CVs, especially with career breaks, weren't even looked at for interviews. They were at that time rejected. And even during interviews, we saw that there were too many personal questions like when are you planning to get married, especially for women, and when do you plan to start family, and this sometimes would also become the basis of rejection of these candidates. Now when I see today's scenario, I think it's completely changed. These are definitely not the questions that we are asking. The hiring managers are for sure looking at capabilities, the competencies the candidates are bringing to the table, rather than the gender or the phase of life they are in. And I can tell you for sure from our organization examples also that we have hired many people, irrespective of the gender, men, women, with career breaks. And like I said, that's no more the focus that we have. Just to give you my own personal example, I came back to work after 7 years of career break, which I didn't think it was possible a decade ago. So that break is no more defining my identity anymore. So that's one example, definitely. And now moving to how things have changed recently, the times have changed recently. We are all living in nuclear families, and the support system that was previously available for young parents has changed drastically now. So, as an organization, of course, we have gender neutral policies, we have flexible ways of working, which are, of course, required. But I think what I've noticed and what has been more impactful is how our managers are owning them. And being the first people, the first person probably that an employee goes and talks to, they are the ones taking a decision of how do I support my team member, be it a young parent, especially young mothers. It could be by offering mutually workable solutions like remote working, flexible working, places where somebody comes back and says they have a need for sabbatical, or the conversation that has really started, and especially post pandemic, has been the mental and emotional well-being, right? And educating, and they are the ones who are taking up these conversations. They are the ones who are educating on the offerings that we have as an organization on employee assistance programs. So if you see from an earlier approach, where it was all about follow the HR rule book, we have moved to asking questions, or I would say empowering questions back to the manager, making them think. And now the managers are coming back, and today's scenario, and I can tell you for sure, is they come back and tell me, hey, this so and so came to me with this request, and I'm making this exception for him or her. So I'm no more involved now into giving them a rule book or that decision making, and they are empowered to do it, right? So while I have narrated these examples, I want to come back to your question on how we can really help leaders understand. The first part I would say is why. Why is this shift or change essential, right? And once you understand the purpose, or then you're more likely to commit to it. So it's important for us to show them an example of connection between culture to the business outcomes. And that's the language they also understand better. Second is what. what needs to really change, like giving them actionable way forward. Uh, and that helps them embed all of this in their day-to-day work, right? The third one is how. Now, how do we really empower these managers? And that's what I was also talking about in my example, to make the shift possible. So giving them the right tools, the framework, and of course, coaching. So in my opinion, I think these are the three essential elements for creating a shared understanding.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. The why, what, and how sounds great, Pratibha. And I'm sure, there would have been barriers that you would have encountered when shifting, from HR owns to co-owned and co-create uh, with everyone, right? Can you throw some light on those?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Smita. Of course, there were barriers, a lot of them, but I think I'll list a few that I have experienced when we were driving culture change in the organization. And the first thing that comes to mind, and we have touched upon also, is the traditional mindset that we have, that culture is a HR thing. And also because it's easy, right, that you leave it to HR for dealing with any complex interpersonal or team dynamic situations directly rather than you getting into it. The second one I would say is role modeling. When leaders or managers do not actively model these desired behaviors, that becomes a barrier. Now, there are, of course, various reasons that this could happen. And if I were to throw a bit of light on what could be these reasons, again, one could be lack of clarity. So many times they don't really see how their actions, inactions, or behaviors directly influence the team dynamics, or the culture norms in the organization. The second reason could be that of ownership. So culturally, who owns uh, who owns culture? So it could be that traditionally we say, yeah, HR, they own the culture, they run it, they fix it. But like Nanda mentioned, the culture is co-owned. So the leaders then, when we ask them to co-own, they may feel unsure of what is expected out of them. So then the default setting is go back to passive participation. The third factor that could influence here is with ownership, along with ownership, always comes accountability. So when we say culture is everybody's responsibility, then the chances that accountability also gets diluted is high. So someone else will do it, kind of an attitude that comes in, right? Now, moving on to the third barrier that comes to my mind would be the lack of structure. We have heard the systems thinking principle that structure drives behavior. And when we are trying to change culture, focusing only on desired behaviors is not going to help. We need to have a proper underlying structure which supports these behaviors. Otherwise, I personally feel that we are setting ourselves up for failure. So for me, I think these are the three major barriers that I have seen from my experience for driving culture change.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Pratibha. So I'm curious now, Gurvinder, to hear from you, based on the barriers that Pratibha is listing here, how did you address it?
Oh my God. Pratibha, was it necessary to put me in a spot here? But okay, but still, thank you for so well elaborating. I think on the mindset barriers, which for sure I fully agree from the business side. But let me just maybe pick up three of these. The traditional view, as you rightly put, or the transactional part, and then the ownership and the accountability, which to me is possibly one set. And looking at first the traditional view part, I think many of us have a view that HR is all about what? Fun activities, conducting interviews, whether exit or incoming interviews, providing data, maybe signing a recognition letter which people can put on LinkedIn, and you get all the recognition for that. Yeah? However, I think in my view, HR has two parts. One is the back end part, and the other is the front end part. let me just explain what I mean by that. So let's take the backend part first. So on the backend part are what you rightly said, the transactional actions of HR, which I just narrated. Definitely very, very important, no doubt about that. But then these get handled by the HR operations side. The touch points with the business, like people like us, is basically coming onto the front end part. And what I mean by the front end part here is that the role of HR in this context is more about being a business partner. And if I have to draw an analogy and go back a little bit in time, I as a business leader has always had a a finance person sitting next to me, which meant that I had one eye, which was off the finance. And you can imagine how much you can see with the one eye, right? The second eye now that has emerged alongside me in the recent past is of the HR side. And now I have two eyes. And you can imagine now what a difference it makes having one eye and now having two eyes. But apart from all the functions that an HR business partner needs to do, which is more people related, strategy, HR strategy, and all of that, I think the most important and important function of the HR business partner in the business is about challenging the business leader. And unfortunately, that's me many times, to remove that unconscious bias so that it is not only the inner circle of the business manager, which of course is very, very strong in most of us, and I admit it is there with me as well, that not that only thrives, but also that the external or the outer circle is then treated fairly. I think that becomes a very, very important element. And as Pratibha was also talking about, you're always watching over, say, from the HR side, the business leader, are we really, talking diversity, or are we actually implementing diversity? And are we asking those uncomfortable questions still, or are we now more understanding of what breaks are? But coming to then to the other barriers, basically, the way I see it is that ownership and accountability basically go hand in hand. When everyone is responsible, I think we all know that truly nobody's accountable there, right? And here maybe I will take two examples to clarify more on the ownership and the accountability part. Let me take an example of the health and safety part. Right? So there was a time that safety officer's job was basically taking care of everything which was to do with safety, which meant that when I would go on my shop floor and see a hazard, I would report it and then move on. And then the other part would be taken care by the HSC person. But over a period of time, that has really changed. In today's time, if I go to my workshop and being an electrical engineer, I find loose wires or even a slippery floor, I just do not log it. I actually make sure that it is fixed because I know it's now my responsibility, my workspace, my people who are there in that workspace, and of course, me, myself, safe. So the ownership part is that part. And if I'm able to do that over a period of time and follow that through, that for me becomes accountability. That was more on the HSC side. Let's look at, say, from more HR side, the development side of things. So today, if I notice a gap in my skills, I do not wait for the HR or HR manager, or for that matter, even my own manager to act. What I do is I look at for the right training, I block my time to learn, and then I apply what I have learned. And my strong belief is that culture works exactly the same way, that it is not an owned function by just one function as it is with HSC or for that matter, development. It's actually shaped by what each of us chooses to notice, which is the logging part, to act on, which is of course the ownership part, and then the follow through, which is the accountability part. And that's how I see ownership and accountability basically going hand in hand, and how culture shifts then from being a program to becoming part of how we work on an everyday basis. I hope I could answer a few of the mindset barriers.
Yeah, absolutely. Collectively, Gurvinder, what I am really hearing from the three of you is culture shows up in invisible things. So the way we listen to our people, the way the example that Nanda said about people asking those great questions and we coach like, and then about feedback. So amazing. I mean, I want to at this point just check in as we are 15 minutes now left in the conversation, and we have a couple of more questions to cover. If the audience has any question specifically for anyone in general, feel free to, write it in the chat. I see a few of you sharing here, really acknowledge. We are just so much into the conversation that not able to focus much, but whatever other questions in the last 5 minutes, the panelists would be happy to, take it. Yeah. So just moving ahead, Nanda, we have few more questions. So just keeping the time in mind, can you share one practical framework or tool that your line managers use? I mean, it's very specific to your system, used to weave coaching moments into the business rhythms without really feeling, that it's been given and mandated.
Absolutely, Smita. So yes, keeping in mind, short answer, we use Grow model. We have 5 streams of coaching, and that is made and ingrained in our DNA. If
Okay.
you want me to stop it, that is a short answer. I'll stop at that.
No, that's amazing. And like I think in a way you really gave a short answer, but Gurvinder, in a way that he explained in terms of that awareness and then again
Yeah,
putting into practice really explains in a much broader way. So then we'll just move ahead with the next one, next question, Nanda. Coming to Gurvinder again, back to you, business point of view. So culture, we say, cascades faster through behavior, and you've been giving examples of those behavioral impacts than just through policies, created by someone. So what's worked best for you in making this happen organically? Again, I mean, rather than really mandating it.
First, let me before I go there, Smita, let me just give you a little bit my perspective on some of the assumptions or the myths around this. And the first one that, and the most important one I see is that coaching behavior naturally flows down the organization ladder. I think that's the myth that all of have has, as if it's the river water which is flowing downhill and naturally flows. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. The other is about not being able to prioritize coaching consciously due to time pressure. And I have been in business for enough years to understand what time pressure is. And I know I still struggle with time pressure. But then that is more a myth, because if you are really practicing coaching, then I think that time pressure automatically is taken care of about. Another common myth is that about the active modeling and the positive reinforcement I see. Uh, that's really a myth, because in reality, people actually often learn more from passive modeling. That is when they observe and pick up your behaviors, even when you're not intentionally trying to demonstrate them. I'm sure many of us are familiar with this popular leadership pipeline model, which was drawn by Ramcharan, Stephen, and James, which describes mostly each leadership level from where I started, say managing yourself to managing others, and eventually, of course, leading up to enterprise or CEO leadership. That requires fundamentally different capabilities. What made successful, say, at one level would actually become a limiting factor at the next level, which then means that you need to make these deliberate shifts in how you lead, think, and maybe even add value. And I think she spoke about this organic part, the leadership transition, to make it organic, say, rather than a mandate or a policy driven. My sense is that you need to create the right mindset shift, build that ecosystem, and of course, the reinforcement mechanism, which I just mentioned about. Very quickly, some of the coaching approaches that I have used in my experience, I know we are short of time, is basically to ask why before the what. And if I have to give an example, say, what will success look like for you, say at this level, and what will you need to let go of because you need to make room for it. The other is more for about, say, creating those micro moments, whether small but repeated experiences, coaching nudges and one-to-ones, or the team connects. And the most important one, which I relate and I believe and I connect very well, is that there is an emotional side of letting go, which is basically to normalize discomfort and create those safe space. And I think it's very, very important more for business leaders that we have this let go, because it basically is freeing up to do a lot more. So that's what I see uh, in terms of growing it organically rather than mandating it by policies.
Mhm. Wow. So I'm truly inspired. Pratibha is here to vouch. I'm sure other team members of yours are, are blessed to have a leader like you. Thank you so much for sharing these examples, Gurvinder. So for the audience and even for the panelists, the last question today for the webinar that we have is, looking ahead, what's one non-negotiable behavior or practice you believe every leader must adopt to truly democratize coaching culture in their area of influence? So, audience, please feel free to just share it in the chat box. And here in the panelist, if Pratibha, you can start with answering this question.
Gurvinder, do you want to go have a go at it first, or you want a break?
Uh, no, I can definitely, Pratibha. And I think, it's about the values, right? And when I talk of values, I think we do practice a lot of values, and I wouldn't say which one is important, which is not important. I think they are all very, very important. But if you ask me one non-negotiable, say from a business leader perspective, for me the non-negotiable part is basically the courage part. And what I mean by courage then is to take action, and when you take action, to manage the consequences. It's about speaking up and asking for help. And in business, definitely we are fraught of risk. I mean, there is no dearth of risk as far as we're concerned in business, but it's all about taking those calculated risks, because otherwise you don't get success if you don't take those risks. And the last one, which is very dear to me, is basically what we inculcate now into our teams, is the fast failure.
Sorry,
What is a fast failure mode? And what I mean by fast failure is that, as leaders, do we encourage our teams, not encourage maybe is the wrong word, but at least give them that space to fail, but fail fast, fail cheap, and most importantly, I think from a business side, is after you have failed and learned, not to repeat that failure again. So courage for me would any day be a non-negotiable value.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, Gurvinder, for so sportingly taking it as the first question. So just picking up, Smita, on what Gurvinder mentioned, right? Courage. It's a very important value, but the way I see it is the fundamental enabler for courage to be demonstrated at a workplace is psychological safety. So it's about creating the foundation for open, honest, growth-oriented dialogues. To me, in my view, is the very essence of coaching, right? So then, how can leaders actually create psychological safety at workplace? I would now, of course, refer back to Dr. Amy Edmondson's the acronym SAFE that she gives us the 4 behaviors. So SAFE, S stands for, of course, set expectations. So we are establishing clear team norms. A stands for accessible, being approachable, and more importantly, I would say being present in the conversation. The F here stands for fallibility. So you, of course, as a leader, show that you're vulnerable. You acknowledge that you may not know everything, and it's okay. You have your learning curves too. E, of course, stands for engage. Engage genuinely, and very importantly, is to listen with intent. So when we create this kind of an environment, I think it helps people do their best, bring their best to work, share new ideas, you're encouraging innovation at workplace, and of course, you're also building a culture where coaching then becomes the way of working and not just a term, right? So, yeah, that was my view. Nanda, would you like to?
Thank you. Thank you, Pratibha. Very beautifully shared.
Absolutely. And I agree with both Gurvinder and Pratibha about the courage and the psychological safety. And looking ahead, at least for me, every leader, every employee must adopt to truly democratize the coaching culture. To build in the coaching culture is intentional listening. And alongside with intentional listening, continuous learning must be part of the DNA. And that's why initiatives like our Learn Connect Grow Day, which we do at our organization, has become so powerful. And this is a day, one single day in the in the whole year, where entire organization, all the 130 different countries, come together to celebrate a simple truth that as humans we want to grow, and to grow we need to learn, and to learn and grow we need to connect. And this beautifully reflects Simon Sinek's golden circle, which talks about the why, which is the growth, the how, which is the learning, and the what, which is the connection. And together, intentional listening and a commitment to lifelong learning ensures that coaching isn't just a leadership skill, and culture is not just HR owned. It becomes a shared mindset embedded in the way we work, we lead, we grow. And when coaching leaves the HR room and moves to the business, culture becomes a shared reality, and coaching is beyond HR walls.
Beautiful. Wow. I feel like clapping at this point. Nanda, beautiful, amazingly tied in as we come to the closure of this webinar. So, audience, if any questions, Yamini, are there any questions here that I think some of the sharing by Neeta normalized discomfort that stays, that's amazing. Andy says confidentiality, the basement to enable trust. I think that is amazing. Um, I think, Pratibha, there is a question for you.
Mm,
How do you enable a new leader joining your company to embody your company's culture? And also, out of curiosity, how do you deal if individuals do not join into the expected role modeling?
yeah. A very nice question, Andy. Thank you for that. The first part of how do we enable the new leaders joining the organization, we have a new manager assimilation program in the organization. So we are always checking in on them every 30, 60, 90 days. So just to see how they are settling in. Also, what is important is how we are onboarding them, what kind of exposures are we giving in the first 100 days in the organization. We have a buddy system as well. So we have peer managers who are also helping out in case it is required. The manager, of course, is also supporting. Apart from this, we do have mentoring programs as well. So depending on what the need is, we are making use of these different tools which are available for us. On the second part of how, yes, now we do, of course, expect everybody to role model these desired behaviors, but there are always times when people are not able to. And I think that's where coaching really plays an important role to have those kind of conversation of why they are not able to cope with this. How can we really help? What are so the minute you understand the reasons of why they're not able to cope, I think then you already have too many things in your toolbox available to support that individual. So of course, coaching conversations play a very important role. Anything, Nanda, Gurvinder, if you want to add from your end, please feel free
No,
to.
and if I have to add, Pratibha, I think yes, from the HR side, there are a lot of things that you guys do, and thank you for that. But I think very rightly, as you also spoke about the ownership and the accountability, I think here as well, from the business side as well, particularly when you have a new joinee, how
Mm.
is me as a business leader owning and taking accountability for the new journey? So I think it goes both together. One is of course the HR support, but also how much ownership we as business leaders take off that new journey to integrate them into the organization.
Wonderful. Thank you. There's one other question here by Manpreet. How do external coaches add value to org culture? Nanda, do you want to take this?
Yes, that's an amazing question. How do the external coaches add value? And as I was mentioning earlier, what Smita asked about a practical model, we have Grow model at our organization, and we have 5 streams of coaching as such. And one of the stream is having an executive coach from an external perspective who coach our leaders over there. And I also saw one of the question, Smita, which mentioned about, do senior leaders don't get irritated when they get coaching questions? Boss, I don't
Yeah.
have time. Answer me, right? And that's where the external coaching comes into picture, where we set right expectations with the leader. We do those chemistry calls with the leader, the senior leader, and of course with the external coach, where they bring in the outside in perspective, and our managers, the senior leaders, get to introspect themselves and setting that expectation that I'm not going to give you an answer, but I'm going to help you explore what you want, right? Make you aware that this is where you are in this situation, and how do you want to come out of it, right? That definitely acts as a big element for us in our organization, at least bringing that external coach, and we do that very genuinely. Those sessions goes for around 6-7 months, and then we have had some amazing feedback on that. So yeah, it definitely brings in a lot of insights.
Yes. Amazing. There is, we are just on time, but there is one more question for you, Gurvinder, and if it is okay for you to
Sure.
take it.
Sure.
The question is, my experience with HR business partners is that they get so many duties on their shoulders, and the real contact to your, where is it?
Uh,
Contact.
your teams and individuals is low, and often they sit in an HR office far away from the business teams. How do you see that? Sorry, Smita, if I
Yeah, yeah.
stepped in
No,
the
thank you
interest
so
of
much.
time.
Yeah, yeah. Just in the interest
Let
of,
me
thank you so
let
much. Yeah.
let me first say, Smita, that my experience is no different. But I think this is where the distinction comes, and I think, as I was saying in the earlier question, it's about the front end and the back end, right? I mean, the responsibilities and the duties that you talk about, and being sitting in the HR office, to me is all the traditional, the transactional, as Pratibha also mentioned, very important. But that's the transactional part, and the front end part is then, of course, the business. And I think this for HR as well, it's been a journey, right? From being an HR to being an HR business partner, for no reason that we call them a business partner, right? And yes, of course, as business leaders, we have a lot of responsibilities on our shoulders, but then HR as well will definitely have. But I think it's then the combination, as I said, if I have 2 eyes, I see better. I need both my eyes. One is, of course, the finance side, which is a given, but very importantly, the HR side as well, for me be able to see through both the numbers as well as the people side.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I would really like to thank our incredible panel here today, Gurvinder, Pratibha, Nanda. What we've heard today really demonstrates that coaching it isn't just a skill, it's a leadership philosophy, and that democratizes culture building. In the future, leadership won't be just defined by control or visibility, but by the ability to grow others. And now it's not anymore a bonus skill, right? It's a core competency that culture for the culture first leader. So for those joining us today, the journey from HR owns culture to culture is everyone's. Ecosystem starts with one conversation at a time. Thank you for joining us today, and remember, you don't need a title to be a culture catalyst. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
See you next
Thank you.
Thank you,
month.
Smita. Thank you
Thank you
so
so much.
much.
Thank you. Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks so
everyone.
much.
Bye. Thank you.